Chapter 7. The next morning we took up the regular work of translating in order to get as clear as insight as possible into the meaning of the characters employed in compiling the records. In fact, we were learning the alphabet of this ancient writing. In this we became very deeply engrossed with our hostess as teacher. We had been occupied in this work for about 2 weeks. When we went to the temple one morning and found our friend Chendersen, who had apparently died and been resurrected, with not a vestige of old age about him, there was no mistaking him. As we came into the room, he arose and came forward with a hearty greeting and handshake. You can imagine our surprise as we gathered around and began to talk and ask questions. We were like a gang of schoolboys turned loose, all attempting to ask questions at the same time, but the fact remained. There he was, with the unmistakable form and voice, but with not a trace of old age about him. Even the voice had regained the vibrant quality of the middle age, and everything about him showed the quality of a well-developed life, buoyant and keenly alive. The expression of the eyes and face was far beyond anything that I could put into words. In the first few moments we could do nothing but picture to ourselves the contrast. When we had first seen him, he was a decrepit old man, leaning on a long staff for support, with long snow-white locks, halting step, and emaciated form. One of our party had remarked when we first met him, "Here we find among these great souls one so aged that he seemed ready to pass to the great beyond." Of course, the transformation which he had witnessed just a few days previous had left its impression, but his sudden disappearance had rather taken him and the incident out of our minds. As we did not think we would ever see him again, it was more than a rejuvenation. I can compare it only to the transfiguration of the once we love and respect so dearly. The soul was serially reborn, judging from the contrast between his appearance the first time we met him and the way he looked this morning. It is true that we had known him only a short time, but he had been thrown in daily contact with him for a sufficient time to see and know that he was an old man. He was with us for nearly 2 years after this, acting as our guide and interpreter across the great Gobi. Years after, when 2 or 3 of the party would meet and our experiences were recalled, the experience of that morning would be the first subject brought up. In recounting these events, I am not going to attempt to follow our whole conversation and record it word for word, for we consumed the greater part of 2 days in just talking, and I believed a detailed account would be tedious reading. Therefore, in this instance, I shall bring out the main points. After the first excitement had abated somewhat, we were seated and he began. As the body represents the lowest degree of thought activities, so the spirit represents the highest thoughts of divine mind. As the body is the outer expression of the thought, so the spirit is that in which the form takes its initial impulse direct from the divine mind. It is immortal and real self, in which reside all the potentialities of divine mind. The thought atmosphere is a real, substantial thing, and has in it all that makes the body. So many people consider the things that they cannot see as unsubstantial, and although they are told over and over that they cannot conceal themselves, they go right on believing that they can. Did Adam and Eve conceal themselves when they were hiding from the Lord or law of God? It is well for us to know the truth that we carry around with us the open book of our lives, out of which all men read whether we realize it or not. Some people are good thought readers, while others are dull, but all can read a little, and we cannot conceal ourselves. Also, our thought atmosphere is constantly precipitating its slowly cooling words on our body, and there it's seen by all men. We can, with a little practice, feel the thought force of this atmosphere that surrounds us and gradually gain a realization of its existence as real as that of the outer world. I have learned that just as man may touch the earth with his feet, so on the wings of aspiration may he soar to celestial heights. Like those of old, he may walk the earth and talk with God, and the more he does so, the more difficult it will be for him to discover where universal life ends and where individual existence begins. When man forms an alliance with God through spiritual understanding, the boundary line between God and man disappears. When this point is reached, man will know what Jesus meant when he said, "I and my Father are one." The great philosophers through the ages have accepted the idea of man as a trinity, but it never was their belief that he was a triple personality. They have considered him a being in his nature is triune. The tendency to personalize all things has degraded that which is called the Blessed Trinity into the impossible conception of three in one, when it can be best understood as the omnipresence, omnipotence, omniscience of the universal mind, God. As long as man considers the blessed Trinity as three persons in one, and as something that must be accepted, even though it cannot be explained, they will dwell in the wilderness and superstition and thus of doubt and fear. If the triune nature of God is spiritual rather than physical, then the Trinity in man must be seen from a mental rather than from the material point of view. One of the wise philosophers had said, despising everything else, a wise man should strive after a knowledge of self, for there is no knowledge that is higher, or that brings more satisfaction of power, than a knowledge of his own being. If a man knows his real self, he cannot do otherwise than discover his latent possibilities, his concealed powers, his dormant faculties. Of what avail if a man should gain the whole world and lose his own soul? His soul is his spiritual self, and if he truly discovers his spiritual self, he can build a whole world if he is serving his fellow men by doing so. I have learned that he who would attain the ultimate goal must search the depths of his real self, and there he will find God, the fullness of all good. It is because man is a trinity in unity, composed of spirit, soul, and body, that in a state of spiritual ignorance, he has the tendency to think on the level with the lowest degree of his nature, which is the physical. The ignorant man looks to his body for all the pleasure he gets, and there comes a time when he gets from the senses all the pain that he can stand. What he does not know, not learn through wisdom, he must learn through woe, and after repeated experiences, he will nor deny that wisdom is the better way. Jesus, Osiris, and Buddha said that with all our understanding we must get wisdom. Thought operating on the plane of the intellectual raises the vibrations of the body to point which corresponds to liquid. On this plane, thought is neither wholly material nor wholly spiritual. It is vibrating like a pendulum between the materiality and spirituality, but there comes a time when one must choose which one he will serve. If he chooses materiality, a world of confusion and chaos awaits him. He may choose the spirit, and if he does so choose, he may ascend to the dome of the temple of God in man. This state of thought can be compared to the gaseous in matter, which is elastic and tends to expand indefinitely. God always leaves it for the man to say whether he will control his fluidic stream of thought in the directions of those celestial heights which bear him above the fog line of doubt, fear, sin, and sickness, or let it sink to the sordid depths of the animals in man. If, in thinking of man as a trinity of spirit, mind, and body, we consider him principally from the standpoint of mind or soul, we shall see that he occupies a position between two great extremes of mental activity, the lower of which is the body and the higher the spirit. Mind is the connecting link between the visible and the invisible, operating on the plane of the senses. The mind becomes the seat of all the animal appetites and passions. It is the serpent of the man's Garden of Eden, which beguiles him into partaking of the poisoned fruit. When Jesus said, "As Moses lifted up to the serpent in the wilderness, even so must the Son of Man be lifted up," he was not referring to the raising of his body on the cross, but to the elevation of the soul or mind above sense delusions. Standing between spirit and body, though separated from neither, the soul or mind is capable of thinking even lower than the brute thinks, or it may enter into the conscious union with pure spirit, where there is an abundance of peace, purity, and God power. When the Son of Man is lifted up to that realm in which he rises above the fallacies of the physical realm, he thinks and acts on the plane of pure intelligence. There he discriminates between those instincts which he shares with every other animal and those divine intuitions which he has in common with God. I have been shown that when man thinks on the plane with pure spirit, the soul enters consciously that realm wherein it perceives the ideal of things, rather than the things themselves. It is no longer dependent upon the senses, but with clearer vision it sees the broad horizon's grander view. It is here that truth is revealed by divine intelligence, and speaks the inspiring and health-giving message. When the Son of Man has been lifted from the depth of his material world, and has been surrounded by pictures of tranquil beauty and refinement of the mental world, after a time he is seized with a healthy dissatisfaction, and the ever upward urge of the soul bears him in higher realms. There he no longer sees a picture of tranquillity, but dwells in the land of tranquillity, surrounded by the perpetual beauty. He has glimpsed the inner, and to him that has become the all, and the outer has become the inner. He lives in the world of causes, where before he moved in the world of effects. The spirit of triune man is pure intelligence, that region of his being where neither sense testimony nor human opinion has any weight against ascertained truth. It is the Christ within, or the Son of God in the Son of Man, the discovery of which sets at rest doubt and its discouragements. It is from this pinnacle of this being that man views all things with the clear vision of the educated soul. He beholds more things in heaven and upon earth than are dreamed of in any philosophy. When he has learned that he is not body with a mind which is ruled either from within or without, but that both can be made obedient servants to his real spiritual self, he has brought into expression that God-given dominion with which he was originally endowed. Spirit is the supreme essence of man's being. It is never diseased and never unhappy, for, as the great soul Emerson said, it is the finite that suffer. The infinite lies stretched in a smiling repose. Job of your Bible told you that man was spirit, and the breath of the Almighty gave him life. It is indeed the spirit in man which gives life, and that spirit rules his lower activities. Spirit issues commands with authority, and all things become subordinate to righteous rule. A new era, wrapped in the garment of approaching day, is dawning in the hearts of men. And soon again will the virgin Spirit of God shine forth from the heart, and the door again will open, by which all who will may find entrance to the larger and fuller life, young, vibrant, with the perennial youth and hope and endeavor. The soul of man stands on the threshold of new era, more glorious than any other that has brightened the sky since creation dawn. The star of Bethlehem shone brighter at Jesus' birth than it had before, but soon its brightness will be like a noonday sun, for his new light foretells the day when the Christ is born in the hearts of all men. Chapter 8. The next morning, Sen continued his talk. I have been shown beyond the question of doubt that the human intelligence can be transmuted into divine intelligence. As this was made plain to me, I found that I could enter the kingdom of God, and that kingdom was right within. Now I know God is the only power, the omnipresent and omniscient, and that sin, discord, sickness, old age, and death belong only to the past experience. I now perceive the reality and know that I had been lost in the mist of illusion. Time and space have completely disappeared, and I know that I now dwell in the subjective and that it belongs to the objective world. Had it been possible for me to have held to the promptings and the glimpse of the finer senses have revealed from time to time, how many weary and anxious hours would I have been saved! While in youth I, like the greater portion of humanity, decided that there was but one life to live, and that was the gratification of self in every way. So I determined to get the most out of that life. I made self-seeking the principal aim in life, and I gave the animal passions full sway, with the result that I dissipated the life fluids of my body until it was but the empty shell that you first saw. Let me bring forth a picture that will more graphically illustrate my thoughts. He sat silent for a moment, and a picture like those already described appeared upon one wall of the room. This was a picture of himself as he had been him a short time ago. It was that of an old man, tottering along, leaning on a wooden staff. Following this was like a likeness of a man as he appeared this morning. He continued, the first represents the one who has dissipated the energies and life fluids of his body until nothing but the empty shell remains. The other represents the one who has conserved his energies and the vital life fluids within his body. You look upon this, in my case, as a complete and entire rejuvenation, which is true. But I look at it from another angle. How many could be fortunate as I was, to have the help, sympathy, and assistance of those dear ones as I have had? In order that you may get my thought, let us follow the life of a person from birth to the end, as so many look upon death. The child is born. It is unconscious of the life-carrying fluids which course through its body, as they are inactive because the organs that generate life fluids are inactive and not yet developed. During this stage of development, if the child is normal, it is beautiful, active, and bubbling over with life. The life fluids are built up stronger and stronger until the child reaches the stage of development where the life fluids are active and they may dissipate. If this dissipation takes place in a few years, the child begins to show age, the eyes lose their luster, the body its activity and grace, the features become set. In a few more years, the brain loses power of coordination with the muscles, and the body is that of the decrepit old man or woman, but the empty shell of the former self. Then take the person who has conserved all life fluids and allow them to circulate in their natural course through the body, and see how strong and vigorous that one is. Should that one go on always conserving the life fluids, even though he did not perceive any higher idea of life than to be born, live a short time upon this earth, then pass on? The span of that life would be extended from 3 to 4 times that of a person who has dissipated the life fluids. If he does perceive that there is a greater scheme of God's plan for him, he will at all times conserve the life fluids in the body, as he soon finds that they are a necessary adjunct for perfect development. It was only a short time ago that you learned men began to know of the delicate system of arteries and veins composing of circulatory system of your bodies. It is still left for them to determine that there is far more delicate and subtle circulatory system throughout the body, which carries the life force to every atom. Through your nervous system, this life force is sent to a set of cells in the brain. These cells, in turn, act as a distributor of the force, and it is sent out to every atom of the body along the nerves, for which it has an affinity. It also acts as protection for the nerves. If the life force is dissipated, the cells become set and cannot change for new cells that are formed to take their place, and the new cells are thrown off instead of the old ones, which gradually decompose and die. If the life force is conserved, the cells change as readily at 500 years as at 10. It will be found that when all the life force is conserved, the body can also charged with life, that you can speak life into all forms. You can paint a picture, model a statue, or take any of your handiwork that expresses your ideal and breathe the breath of life into it, and it will become alive. It will speak to you and to others who can see the life inspiration that have spoken into it, and it will be active because you, the Lord God of you, has spoken, and it has. He wills. But those forms will not assume the human unless you carry them to the God life. If you do give them life, you must carry them through to the pure God life. Then they are perfect forms, as you are perfect, and you have fulfilled your responsibility. This you will find is true genius. There is one vital error that I wish to point out. The genius, as you consider him, as he begins to develop, has consciously or unconsciously acquired the ability to conserve and send the life force in their purity through their natural channels. This condition has animated his body and the creative faculty, and he sees that there is something higher for him to express than ordinary. While he conserves the life forces and gives them free rein, he will go on to more and more glorious achievements. But if he allows sex lust to creep in, he quickly loses his creative power. The body has been first built up by conserving the life forces until the cells are of the final texture than the low order of person who has dissipated the life force. By this time the genius had risen to fame, and not having developed the deeper perceptive or God power, is carried away by self-glory, for he forsakes his guiding light because he has not been fully awakened. In the urge for greater excitement, he begins to dissipate the life forces and quickly loses all power. For if man does raise his thought above the animal passions and conserves the life forces until the body has begun to take on the final texture, then allows himself to fall back, he will go back much more rapidly than one that has not been thus awakened. When one has been awakened so that he will conserve all the life forces and let them be distributed to the nerves in the natural way, then let them go coursing along the nerves to every atom of the body without deforming it with thoughts of sex, lust, or passion. The exhilaration will be permanent, and sensation will far transcend that of sex. The serpent will be lifted up and will need to crawl on its belly through the murk and mire of lust and passion. If man could understand that this life fluid is many times more vital than a corresponding amount of pure blood, he would conserve instead of dissipate it. But he shuts his eyes to this fact. He may be entirely ignorant of it, and goes on, either in blindness or ignorance, until the reaper arrives. Then a wail goes up, for he does not admire the harvest. You look upon old age with veneration and snow-white locks as a crown of honor, which I would not detract from in any way. But as you look upon the picture, I leave it for you to decide which is more to be honored, he with the snow-white locks, who has by ignorance or direct perversity brought decrepitude upon himself, or the one who in maturity becomes more vital, strong, and better equipped to meet the advancing years, and because of them is more kind and generous. I recognize that the one who reaches the end through ignorance is to be pitied, while the one who knows and reaches the same end is unspeakable.